Welcome to Catholic Ed for All, your insight into topics of special education and Catholic schools. This is Dr. Raul Escarpio, and I invite you to join me as we learn how to be more inclusive in Catholic schools and continue to live out Pope St. John Paul II's message of open wide the doors to Christ. And now, on to our show. On the show today, I am joined by Dr. Michael Boyle, Superintendent for the Diocese of Joliet and former Director of the Andrew M. Greeley Center for Catholic Education at Loyola University, Chicago. Michael is also on the boards of both the Journal of Catholic Education and the National Catholic Partnership on Disability and a member of the Professional Development Advisory Board for NCEA. Why, hello, Mike. Welcome to the show and thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Michael, after reading all those things that you are doing, you must be exhausted now being superintendent.
They're kind of long days now.
Can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I never intended on being a superintendent. I started off as a school psychologist, so I've worked in the public school system with kids with a variety of different exceptionalities in a variety of different settings, ultimately becoming a special education director of a high school, and did that, and ultimately left that to become a district director of special education, and then made the jump. And it's kind of an unusual jump because usually people don't go from private or from public to private, but I ended up becoming a Catholic school principal in St. Mike's in Wheaton, and then ultimately left that position to take to join the Greeley Center at Loyola University in Chicago.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you and I talk every so often, but we never get to talk about your family, particularly your children. I believe one of them is a college baseball player.
Not anymore. He graduated. So I have 5 kids altogether. My oldest one lives in Chicago. He works for a financial firm. My second one lives in Atlanta, down in your neck of the woods, and he works for a commercial real estate firm. My daughter is a nurse. She is a labor and delivery nurse, and she also lives in Chicago. My fourth one, who is the baseball player, he is actually doing some entrepreneurial stuff around baseball statistics and working at a startup company. But he also works in a Catholic high school as a recruiter as well as a baseball coach. And then my last one is a junior at St. Louis University.
Wow, Mike, that's a lot of pride right there that you and your wife must have.
Yes.
So you and I have always talked special education over the years that we've known each other, but I don't think I've ever asked you what led you to have this passion in special education.
You know, it's such an interesting question because I think people almost immediately, ask if I had a family member with a disability, which I did. I do. My mother has multiple sclerosis, and which impacts her in a variety of different ways. But I'm not sure that's what was sort of the founding kind of thing that led me into special education. I think I always had, sort of using a Jesuit phrase, I think I've always had a passion for the preferential option for the marginalized, and have always sought, those kinds of professions, I think, and was always interested in those kinds of professions, really about helping people get access. And I think that's what ultimately led me as being a school psychologist, which was all about providing access and worked in a variety of settings as a school psychologist to create inclusive options for students with disabilities, to have options for mainstream in regular, general classrooms, and ultimately creating an inclusive preschool as a district director of special education. We created a community-based preschool that was completely inclusive, and so I think it's about just a sense of justice and a sense of access and a sense of equity that sort of drove me, I think, to looking at special education.
Fantastic. So can you So you're a superintendent now, and you said that you never expected to be a superintendent. So what led you to that calling?
Uh, it's it was a battle this summer actually. um, uh, um, so I got to so the superintendent, former superintendent of Joliet, took another position down in Florida, which led this position open. I got a call from the search chair and asked two questions. A, um, would I be interested in applying for the position? And B, if not, would you serve on the committee? I'm like, oh, well, I'll never be a superintendent. And so I said, I'm happy to help out. And um, and several times throughout the process of the search, the initial stages of the search committee, they asked, do you want to apply? Do you want to apply? And usually, when I have sort of, job, openings like that sort of presented to me, I usually just, I'm like, no, that's not right. And I'll let it go and don't think about it. But this is one that just sort of haunted me. I knew this was for all schools, especially Catholic schools right now, this was going to be challenging. In terms of looking at reentry, looking at modes of instruction, whether or not it's going to be face to face or virtual, and just sort of guiding through. And the Diocese of Joliet is my home diocese. This is where I live, so I feel particularly kind of enamored with this place. And quite frankly, I felt like sort of Jonah in the whale. I kept trying to run, and I kept trying to run from this call, and I couldn't run fast enough, I guess. And ultimately, through a lot of support from a lot of very good colleagues and a lot of prayer, I made the choice to send my application, to kind of resign from the search committee and actually send my application in, and then went through the process, then to ultimately get offered this position. So it was a lot of prayer, a lot of wrestling. I felt like I lost a wrestling match with God on this one.
Well, that is Jonah. I mean, wrestling with God was someone else, though. But Jacob
Yeah,
wrestled the angel.
right,
Right.
right.
Uh, but you know what? I was saying in another podcast, man plans and God laughs. So basically,
Absolutely.
we have our ideas, but what a blessing for the Diocese of Joliet to have you, Mike. What a blessing. So,
Thank you. I appreciate
um,
it.
so let's talk about this diocese that you find so attractive and is in your hood, as they say, in your neighborhood. Tell me about the diocese and the schools.
Yeah, so the diocese is actually it's located to the west and south of the Archdiocese of Chicago. So we butt up right against Chicago. Um, we, if you know the geography of Illinois, we go everything from like basically Roselle, which is the top, all the way down to Kankakee. We're about 5 different counties. We're 52 educational programs with about 8 high schools, the rest elementary and preschool programs across the diocese. So really everything from early childhood all the way to grade 12 in terms of the kind of programs, the scope of programs that we offer.
Fantastic. So, in these schools, Michael, what is your vision for special education in your diocese?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, everybody knows that that's where my area of interest is, and everybody wants to know what that's going to look like. And I think um, I think it's going to follow exactly what I've always written about: is really creating those kinds of environments that are going to be provide just sort of the access and equity to as many students as we possibly can. So really building capacity in our schools and of our staff to be able to support a variety of different learners, and we know that's going to look different. I mean, in our diocese, we go everything from the rural, suburban, and urban. So we've got really all three of those settings. We've got schools that are highly resourced, and we have schools that are under resourced. So trying to create supports programs, to support all students, given sort of that really kind of diverse sort of profile of our schools. But the one thing I do know about our diocese is that we've got really courageous leaders here. We've got courageous teachers, and I think to help kind of sort of guide them and collaborate with them as we build those, increase our capacity to serve more learners.
And as my friend Mike would say, you're creating systems for
Right.
success.
And that's just it. And the challenge then is also then not just, obviously, I'm real passionate about the special education, but also thinking about other kinds of opportunities and support. So, for, students of various language backgrounds, how can we not only look at the learning supports, for students with disabilities, but how do we look at other kinds of learning supports to provide, students that are new to English? Because I think, that's something else that we should be doing as Catholic schools is kind of widening our doors, to let, all of God's people in. So, I think that's a thing that I'm kind of particularly excited about is, and again, kind of stretching my wings a little bit because it's an area that's not been necessarily in my background, but certainly looking forward to learning about it.
Yes, absolutely. So, with all these thoughts that you have about special education and giving access, tell me one goal you have for this upcoming school year. We talked about your vision. Now, tell me about one goal you have for your diocese.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm excited about. I think and part of those goals are tempered really with our response to COVID. Because and that's I think what makes this kind of particularly challenging because our principals, our teachers, our staff, our families, our students are all stretched and right now in terms of learning looks very different. So I think just providing really some basic foundational kinds of approaches in terms of really increasing our capacities in terms of teaming, working together in very collaborative processes. I think by the end of this school year, I think would be a really sort of obtainable goal, and certainly something that can fit within all of the other things that COVID is presenting to us.
Absolutely. I hadn't thought of asking this question until now, but those students with inclusive needs, they have learning plans in your diocese, correct?
We don't have necessarily a diocesan level. They're more building based, but those students do have whatever accommodations, modifications, whatever their learning needs are specified in a plan.
Fantastic. So my last question to you, Mike, is the one that I always ask: is what should Catholic special education look like?
Well, I believe more than I've ever believed now that all kids deserve access. And so I think that we can't blame financial reasons why we can't do that. I've seen schools that with very little resources be able to provide wonderful supports for kids with disabilities. So I believe that it's about providing, again, it's access and equity. And my dream would be that all schools provide access and equity to the students that want to obtain a Catholic education.
Fantastic. And Michael, I am so happy for you in your new role. I want to thank you for joining me. I think about you often. I'll quote you often when I say baptism is their birthright and their entry into Catholic schools when we're talking about children with special needs. So I wish you nothing but prayers and blessings as God's leading you into this new path in your life.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and head over to iTunes, subscribe to Catholic Ed for All, and leave a review? Join me again next time as we continue to advance God's kingdom by including all of God's children in Catholic schools. Till then, this is Dr. Raul Escarpio for Catholic Ed for All. Thanks for listening, and may God bless you.